now we will listen to Ohad Levy, who will tell us something about Foreman. When you are, and enjoy.
Okay, yeah, works. Thank you. All right, welcome everyone. I'll start with a quick poll as usual. How many of you guys were here yesterday when I did a similar talk? Okay, I'll try to do it different. All right, how many guys are using Foreman? Awesome. How many of you guys didn't hear about Foreman? All right, and the rest think it's crap. Good. All right. My name's Ohad. I work at Red Hat today. I'm mostly the maintainer of Foreman. I initially created it as a learning experience from actually a German company I used to work for called Infineon. We are managing lots of data centers and lots of servers with Puppet back then in 2007 forward. And I've decided that I want to try and take understanding that the problem domain that Puppet solves is a huge place for collaboration, basically meaning that we all have the same problems. If one of us get a good solution, we should all share it, reuse it, and go on to solve the next problem. So instead of having everyone reinvent the wheel, we kind of try to, at least within Foreman's domain, try to consolidate, because Puppet solves a great amount of set of the problems, but Foreman tries to address a few other problems that are not necessarily taken by or handled by Puppet. But the synergy between the tools is pretty awesome. Right, so let's talk about what Foreman is and where do we try to position it. So generally talking about, when we talk about system, it has some sort of a life cycle. That life cycle takes care for installation, the initial setup, and the never-ending story of maintaining it. So really, Foreman is trying to address those by handling both the provisioning of configuration and monitoring of your system. So if we talk about provisioning, we used to do a lot of bare metal and move to virtualization and later on move to cloud, or have a mixture of those today. Obviously, we can't have virtualization without bare metal and so on. So Foreman tries to simplify that process of creating something where we tend to believe that, maybe another question, how many of you guys think that the Puppet manifests that you write are going to be consumed by you or rather by someone else in your organization? So how many guys actually use, or let's say how many guys of you have someone else who consumes and doesn't necessarily need to understand what's Puppet is doing, just using it, roughly? Okay, so the idea was something similar. So we understood that there are some guys who really understand Puppet, really understand what's going on, and there are a lot of guys who just want to consume it. Those could be operators, could be, maybe you just share something on the Forge, and I don't care, I just know it's set up this database, I don't want to know the internals, or this OpenStack, whatever. So the idea was to do something similar, have Puppet content and provisioning and the whole lifecycle problem to be accessible by someone who doesn't really need to understand the details. He just wants to consume it. It could be a power user in your organization, it could be the operator, or it could be just your colleague. It doesn't need to know all of the small details. So that's provisioning. Then obviously we have the configuration bits where we interface with Puppet, ENC. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what ENC stands for? Raise your hand if you don't. Don't worry about it. All right, good. So very, very quickly, ENC is a standardized approach where Puppet can accept, basically Puppet goes and asks, oh, I got this system asking me for Puppet configuration. What should I do? Which classes should I apply? What are the different parameters I might need to apply here? And basically, this is an interface where, in this case, Puppet goes to Foreman and asks, OK, what should I do next? And basically, Foreman gives us back the interface. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, parameterized classes and hierarchical alternative to Hiera and so on. I'll be more than happy to show that later on. And by the way, I forgot to mention, stop me, ask me questions at any point in time. I might not answer, but you can still ask me. All right, and when we talk about monitoring, it's not your average Nagios kind of monitoring. It's basically, is Puppet doing everything it's supposed to be doing? Is Puppet running? Did it actually perform the change I was expecting it to happen? And basically give me a real status of what's going on in overall Puppet and inventory and all of that stuff. Right, so a bit of Foreman architecture. Foreman is a Rails application. Basically supports better web users, obviously, and API users, or CLI. Has a database, knows how to talk to LDAP and so on. And in general, Foreman has a concept of something called smart proxies. Those proxies are basically all of those services in our data center which don't always have an API that is easy to consume. So we've created a bunch of services that knows how to talk, for example, to DNS, knows how to talk to DHCP, knows how to talk to with Puppet CA, and so on, power management, and basically expose that through a simple API that Foreman can consume. And this basically allows us to have one single Foreman instance. Doesn't have to be a single server, but one single Foreman instance, and multiple data centers, multiple locations, multiple segmented networks, and so on, firewall that you need to open just for the proxy to communicate. And this actually works really great when you have a large organization with a lot of systems deployed everywhere. The next bit, obviously, is the Puppet stuff. That's what we're here for. So Foreman knows how to parse Puppet reports and give you a real understanding what's going on, what did Puppet actually do. Obviously, we know about your facts, your custom facts, your standard facts, and the ENC interface. We support multiple Puppet masters. We support multiple Puppet CAs, all the combinations that you might need when you go large as well. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Foreman works with only some, you can choose and pick only the parts you care about. Like, you just want reporting, that's fine, just use it for reporting. You just want it for reporting and ENC, fine, go ahead. If you want the whole provisioning, fine, that's also fine. And you can really choose what you want, when you want it to use Foreman to do. Now, the next part is obviously Foreman needs to, in order to actually provision, bare metal, kind of one problem, set of problems that you have to solve. But we also know how to talk to various cloud providers. It could be EC2, it could be VMware, it could be OpenStack, OVM, and so on. So pretty easy to extend Foreman. And I'll show you later on that the process to create a VM on OpenStack and the process to create it on VMware is pretty much the same from an operator point of view. It doesn't need to understand really the difference as much. Right, so let's talk a bit more. Inventory. All of our facts. We have a pretty awesome way to search through everything. So Foreman is a search-driven application. You can search everything in the application. Very similar to queries that you say name equal or facts like or value and whatever. And we generate a lot of graphs in the application. This is, for example, a dashboard of what's going on. Not so pretty. I'll show a real example in a couple of minutes. Same thing goes for reports. We show you all of what Puppet did. We have the ability to search, like show me all of the changes that had a certain change in them. Show me all of the files that were changed. Show me a diff of the file that was changed, and so on. We also have Audit Log. So if someone changes something through Foreman, add a class, remove a class, all of that stuff gets tracked. Summary emails, alerting. And basically, this is a simple view of a report. So how long it took. On the top is our notice lines, and below some graphs to show you how much each component took. Like file processing took that much, and server compilation took that, and so on. When we talk about ENC, basically we have a way to group systems. That's kind of trivial. We call it host groups. And you could assign classes to each and every system. Basically, you just have a list of all of your classes. Foreman imports all of your Puppet environment, reads all of your classes, reads all of your class parameters, and later on you can just include, associate certain classes with your host or group of hosts. When we talk about provisioning, as I mentioned, bare metal, public, private, image-based, PXE-based, with DNS, DHCP, TFTP, or IPXE, or all of the combinations possible. We have a way to do full kickstart and pre-seed for those who want to do bare metal or PXE-based deployments. And we can do Red Hat, CentOS, Fedora, Debian, and Ubuntu, OpenSUSE, Solaris, and maybe I forgot one or two. Without having to have images up front or anything, or even ISOs up front. So we can just pick a mirror and deploy the system for you. Okay, we also have an important part in Foreman is orchestration. That means when you actually create a system, there's a lot of stuff that happens. Maybe DHCP and DNS, and if it's a VM, maybe you have to create a virtual storage and things like that. So Foreman actually tries to handle failure. So if I fail to create the storage for this VM, I'm going to remove the DNS entry I just added a minute ago or a second ago. So I'm not going to leave you some stale stuff in your infrastructure. And sometimes when there are conflicts, let's say you have some leftovers, the obvious example is reverse PTR record, so Foreman knows to suggest to clean it out for you or things like that. And it's pretty easy to extend. There's a plugin architecture, so you can, if you have a custom need, like I need to update my CMDB, God forbid, or whatever system, I want to send a hey you bot notification every time something happens. Pretty easy to extend all of those actions. Obviously, it's a management application, so we have user management, could be Active Directory, LDAP, or free IPA working on it. We have full-based, role-based access control. That means every single action in the UI have permission. Every single in the API have permission. You could really define who can do what in the application. Every user will get its own view based on its permissions, and no one will have access that is not supposed to be. So it's really easy to create different sets of roles and associate permissions to them, and different people in your organization are going to see completely different things.
Are they hierarchical?
The what?
The role-based access control.
I'll show you in a minute. Hierarchical in what way? So you can have groups of users, and inside that another group?
You have a group of operations, so then you can say, like, okay, I've got these types of access control. I'm just going to call that power user.
Okay.
Things like that.
I'll show you in a minute. Hopefully it answers better your question. Okay, in order to get Foreman running, it's pretty easy. We have Puppet modules to install Foreman and a small wrapper on top of that, which actually deploys up to you. You can deploy Foreman obviously in its proxies, but you can also deploy Puppet Master with with all of the details like passenger. You can even go further, have dynamic Git environments. It's really there's pretty much, I think there's around about 50 or 100 people who are contributing to those Puppet modules, which makes them really, really good Puppet modules around Apache, Puppet Master, and so on. So it's pretty easy to just either consume them in your day-to-day Puppet infrastructure to manage Foreman or your Puppet Masters, for example. You don't have to, but it's easier. Foreman has a really awesome plugin infrastructure. That means everyone can write a plugin that extends, and I know a few of you guys here actually did that. That's awesome. Basically, you can extend Foreman to do other stuff. Obvious example, I just picked a few. U-boot notification, like RSC notification, or adding another column to the list of systems, or whatever you guys want to do. There's also pretty awesome plugins that really big in terms like the Foreman Discovery plugin, which adds discovery capabilities to bare metal system. That means if you just have a whole rack of systems, they actually get automatically booting and registering to Foreman, and then you can consume them automatically. And basically, there's pretty much a lot. People write plugins for PuppetDB integration. People write plugins for single sign-on in their environment, and pretty much a lot of interesting things that people are doing with it. I mentioned briefly we have a REST API. Fully, pretty much everything you can do in the UI, you can do for the API. We have versioned API. That means we are really caring about if you write scripts or whatever to consume that. we ensure there's API compatibility across Foreman versions, and there are multiple versions of the API. So if you started with version 1, and your script works with version 1, as long as version 1 is available, you can use it without being afraid that every version you have to check your scripts again and your integration. I'll demo in a second the search, but the search-driven is actually also working with the API. So there's lots of good, interesting ways how you can, either in Puppet types or within Puppet functions, you could actually consume like store configs or other ways you can actually consume Foreman data inside of your manifest. So I think, Nigel, the original example came from you when you had VPNs in Google where you're disconnecting clients after. So it's really trivial for Foreman to come and say, give me all of the clients that ran Puppet successfully in the last week, and those are not, won't be allowed to connect to VPN, for example. It's really trivial to do it with a search function where you ask Foreman, just give me back this list of systems that are allowed to. We have a CLI. Someone actually wrote a mobile app for Foreman, runs on iPhones and Android devices. So the API, is fully capable. There's a Ruby binding for the API if you're into Ruby. So pretty much you can do quite a lot of stuff as well. What else? Okay, we have multi-tenancy. That's sometimes important in large organization where you need to segment either by location or by different departments like UA, engineering, whatever. So we actually support them both, where you could either have just locations, just organization on both of them enabled. And what it does is pretty much segment Foreman. So if you have multiple locations and you have a user that can only access one location, he'll see only that location. He won't see anything that is related to the other location and so on. So this gives a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility when you need to consume resources, and sometimes those resources are available only in a certain context. So in options that doesn't make sense actually are not visible to the user to start with. Trending, this is just a way to trend things over time. For example, if you're upgrading your Puppet version, you want to trend, see how well you're upgrading. So how many systems over time actually being upgraded to the new version. Or if you're doing whatever, something, it could be fact-based or something that Foreman knows about. Basically, you can see over time how many systems I had like this. And a few weeks later, how many systems then, or whatever the interval that you choose. A few of our users, we have CERN, SpaceX, BBC, and so on. The fact that it's an open source software pretty much makes it, I have no idea who's using Foreman unless they complain or unless they say thank you. So we have no idea, but we keep on hearing about other users. Even here, I met a lot of users in the last few days. So it's kind of awesome that there's so many of you. In terms of community, we have a website with lots of example videos, YouTube, and manuals and so on, so it's pretty easy to get started. We crossed 100 contributors recently, which is pretty awesome, having more than 100 people contributing code. We exist on IRC, we have Google groups, we have Google community, and on Foreman organization at GitHub. Right, so any questions before I move to the demo? Right, cool. Let's do a demo. Hold on. So, demos on VPNs sometimes don't work that well, but we'll try. What I'll try to do here is just to create a system, provision a system, and let Puppet consume that. So this is a system I have back home. So it's a bit slow, but let's just deploy something. Puppet camp. I can choose where I want to deploy it, which organization. In my case, I'll just choose to deploy it in my home setup. You can choose, based on the settings I already defined, what belongs to this organization and location. Let's say I can choose libvirt, for example, or EC2, just do libvirt. Here's maybe I'll choose a web server, and it will pretty much fill in all of the other details. We can see here we have a list of classes. We can see here it actually allocates an IP address. It does IP address management. for you. The proxies know to figure out which IP address is not in use by your DNS and DHCP and figure out what's available and suggest an IP address. You could choose whatever operating system you want to deploy. Whatever is in the list, you just, whatever. The VM, properties, parameters, there's, you can see here, there's like parameterized classes that you can overwrite, and I'll show maybe more about that. But basically, when I click on submit, it's gonna create quickly DHCP, DNS. That was too quick for you to see, but a lot of stuff happened. The VM was created, everything was basically created, and now the system is actually, in this case, PXE booting. This is, you can see here the system booting and configuring itself. This is a PXE style, so it's going to consume a kickstart or a pre-seed. It's going to all of that, and that's also available within Foreman. So we can come back to the system in a couple of minutes. All right, so I also have a local instance here, which is a bit faster, I hope. Let me go back to your question, because you asked that. I'll show you how the users and permissions kind of work. So you have users, all kind of users. You have roles, where if you look at the roles, here is on the left side you have everything that every permission that is there, and you can simply, there's a list of roles here. You could just kind of click and say, oh, this one can edit Puppet environments, and this one can't, and whatever. You can see it's a pretty long list. There's an important button here. Okay, disappeared in my version, but there's a button somewhere that toggle all. So if you don't have to check everyone, every single one of them. Yeah.
You told us rollback functionality. Can you show?
Yeah, the question was that I showed there's a rollback functionality. Let me try. Sometimes it's hard to create a scenario where, wonderful. Let me try create a system with a DNS C name that I have. So I'll create it. I have a yum dot something. So let's see what happens. Okay, live demos, not always working, but just give it a second so it gets the IP and so on, and then we can deploy it. Right. So let's see what happens. Again, here, you see it tells me that a conflict, there is a DNS A record in this case, and it could be that already in the background it tried to create a DNS. Maybe, I'm not sure if DNS is the first thing it does because it's pretty fast. But it could have done a few things, then rolled back, failed, and went back. And you can see I have this button here, overwrite, saying I know what I'm doing, do it anyway. Sometimes not the best idea, but yeah. Yeah, you had a question?
One question about parameters.
Yeah.
I guess you can insert Puppet parameters somewhere.
Let me show you how.
Where can you get them?
Let me show you how it works. So when you, either in environments or on your classes, you can import for a given Puppet master. Here I have a list of my Puppet masters. I have a couple. And I can import. When I import it, it actually goes, and there is on the Foreman proxy, there is an API which gives us actually JSON with all of the classes, all of their parameters, all of their type, their default value, and so on. Foreman takes all of that and creates a list of classes, Puppet classes, where inside the Puppet classes, let's take, for example, let's take the Foreman class. So inside here, we have, besides classifying to which, which host groups it belongs to and which Puppet environment it works with and so on, we have all of the class parameters. All of them were imported automatically. And let's say we have application root or whatever you want. So first of all, you see them all here. By default, they're not doing anything because they all have defaults. So if they have defaults, Foreman doesn't say that you have to overwrite. It's up to you to define that, let's say, I want to overwrite something, so I can click on the overwrite button here. Let me scroll down a bit. I can click on the overwrite, then I can also force the type of the in this case, it's a Boolean. We use the param style, so there's actually a reference to a variable here, so Foreman can't understand what is the type. But if you don't use this style and you just have parameter equal 8080, maybe I actually have a better example. Hold on. Let's see if in Apache, maybe it's called Apache 2. No. Maybe it was OpenStack. So it actually gets the default value from your manifest. You don't need to override it. I don't know if I have something like that here. Yeah, here, for example, cache server IP is a variable. Default value is 127, localhost. If I don't care about it, I leave it that way, and Foreman will not do anything. Let Puppet take the default value. But I could still say, I want to override that. I know what I'm doing. And then you can probably make the decision. So first of all, you can just change the default. This way you don't change the manifest, you just change the default, and you just have one default. That's fine. Maybe it works. But many times you need more complicated logic in order to determine what is the right value for a given host. And in that case, you have a few options. First of all, you can mark it as required. That means everyone will have to override it. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't make sense. But we also have a very easy way to match the value based on a hierarchy. Very similar. How many of you guys use Hiera? All right, so you know what I mean when I'm saying hierarchy. Like first try to match on the FQDN, then try to match on the environment, then try to match on things like that. So basically we have here a simple set list of order where you can match. First it will try to find based on the owner, because Foreman is user aware, so it knows who's the owner. Let's say I want all of my machines to have my SSH key, for example. It could be matched on the FQDN, on the group, on the OS, on the domain, and so on. You can change the order, by the way. Like my NTP setup looks completely different. It's like based on the domain and based on the provider. Like if it's EC2, I'm going to use the EC2 NTP server. I don't, so the order, the hierarchy looks completely different. And then I can just add matchers. Let's say if the owner is me, I want to put maybe SSH, I don't know, my SSH public key. And if it's someone else, or if it's a different match, and so on, you could kind of fill in your own values. You get to see them all in one place. Now, don't be confused. This is the administrator page. This is not what the users see. Once I click required here, override here, that means it's going to be visible to the user. So if I'm, as a user, going to create a new OpenStack server, for example, so I'm just going to choose maybe OpenStack because I have a predefined group here. You can see, first of all, the parameters tab became red because I have one required, or a couple of those that are required, but all of them are already here. You can see what Foreman did is actually try to resolve based on the matchers, try to figure out what is the value I'm going to get in advance. It's going to show the user, in this domain, you're in this domain, so the value will be already this. And every time you change the form, like you change something that depends on the hierarchy, this form is going to change and be updated. And I could just override something. There is an example. If you took the time to explain and put a description, it's going to show up here for the user. And I could just override it and later on just put here a different value. And this would create a value for this specific system. So it's really pretty simple for the user. You have to do. You have to know a little bit what you're doing, but it's pretty simple for the user without. He doesn't need to go into those complicated hierarchy and understand the hierarchy at all. They just want to override one value and be done with it. Hopefully this answers your question. All right. Someone else was raising hands before, and I ignore him. Yeah, go ahead.
So the database Foreman imports data from, is it actually a Puppet manifest or is it a shared stored config database, or what's the source of data?
Okay, the question was, correct me if I'm wrong, where does Foreman store the data?
No, where does it gather the data from it imports?
Where it gets, okay. Where does Foreman gets all of the parameters and classes from? Okay. The proxy runs on your Puppet master. So it exposes an API, with the responsive JSON that gives us back reading from the file system what is currently checked out probably on the Puppet master file system. So it gets back a big hash with all of the environments and their whatever, and this way we can collect. So a lot of users actually have in their Git, they have a custom hook that goes and tell Foreman, go and refresh now the Puppet classes and their values, default values. Yep.
Is this proxy functionality, is it all only one way, or can you write to the manifest from Foreman? Okay,
so the question whether you could update Puppet manifest from Foreman. So we kind of think that Puppet is doing whatever, Puppet's doing a great job. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. You probably have a good reason why you put manifest in Git. And there's probably a good reason why someone has access and someone doesn't have access. So we kind of say, okay, we understand the problem of logic and data separation. That means somewhere, maybe in the Forge, maybe somewhere else, you have a list of plugin modules and they do something. And maybe through parameterized classes, you can pass some arguments that change the behavior or, according to your need. So we try to be on the data side and not touch the manifest itself. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have some role management or permission management on classes as well?
The question was if we have role management or permissions on classes. So we kind of think that per class is probably the wrong way to do it. Like to say per class, we've introduced the concept of groups, and therefore you have a group representing an application maybe, or it could be, we have actually nesting of groups, so could be a base or some sort of a standard, and inside you something else that inherits from that, so the list of classes gets accumulated. But then we assign the permissions on the group level. And that person can, so for example, if you have someone who's responsible for an application, an opera or whatever, and cross multiple locations, cross multiple instances, he can only manage, for example, only those systems, no matter where they are. But we don't do it on a per class level. Just think it's wrong.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, for example, you assign the class to a group?
Let me show you. Maybe it's easier. So we have the concept of host groups. In a group, let's say, you can already see they're nested to some degree. Like we have base here. I don't know if it's big enough. We have base here, and then everything else inherits from base. So I could have my application inherits from base, or maybe I could have a completely different thing. And then inside every group, it's actually pretty similar to the form we saw before when we were creating a new system. You kind of can define like what are the Puppet classes that should be included, and maybe what are their default parameters, and so on. And you could also say what is the default operating system for this group, and then you can easily go to a user or a group of users and say, let's say, I'll take whatever, and he could have, he could either manage certain domains if you have multiple domains, or maybe compute resources. This is how we call the virtualization providers, or host group. And I could say, okay, this guy can only manage OpenStack, and that's it.
Okay, so you don't have like a privilege separation on one server. So if one is...
Sure, you can set permissions based on ownership of single servers. That's also possible. So you can set...
I mean, you have one server, and you have like some administrative stuff which runs on the server, which should be handled by the admin team, and you have like...
Oh, you mean, okay, so if I get you right, the scenario you're referring to is I have a security team which defines base classes. They have to be always there, and I have someone else who adds an application owner, adds a few more classes on top. So the way it works is, that's why the host groups are nesting. So the way it works, you have to enforce that the application inherits that base level, that SOE, some people call it, standard operating environment. You inherit that, and they don't have access to the lower level group, they can only update, and the lower level group includes everything which is in the, sorry, the top level group inherits everything from the lower group. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Is there a Puppet DB backend so that Foreman gets effects from Puppet DB, not from the file system?
No. The main two reasons for that. First of all, Puppet has, so the question was, does Foreman goes to Puppet DB to consume facts and reports, I guess? Reports is too new, okay, just facts. Okay, so Foreman initially had its own fact storage, so it actually stored facts. I didn't show that, but you know, you could see here all of the facts of all of the systems, and you know, I don't know if any interesting fact. I'm trying to find a interesting graph to show you. Uptime graph, not that interesting, right? But you could just, so all of the facts are already there. Now, the main reason why we don't go to PuppetDB, there are probably two reasons. First of all, not everyone's using PuppetDB. No, yeah, I mean, we saw before how many people said that they're using PuppetDB. So not everyone uses PuppetDB. But the more important part is that sometimes we do complicated search queries where we ask for facts and we ask for other things. So let's, for example, I want to find all of the system with a certain fact, like client version equals 302, for example. And I want to know about the owner, maybe or the organization, which is something that only Foreman knows about. And then I would need to fetch all of the facts from PuppetDB and then do in-memory join to figure out a union of these two in memory, and that would be very inefficient. So it will, you know, make everything a bit slower and so on. So it's kind of, I mean, I'm really into using PuppetDB, maybe as a alternative is as a transport layer. So what we do currently is that facts are stored on your Puppet masters, and the external node classifier script actually uploads the facts every time the Puppet client is running. So it could be that since if you have a PuppetDB, we could ask over the REST API and consume the facts this way rather than, but it still duplicates the data. I'm more than happy to find a better way, and you know, I just didn't find a good argument. You know, we really need facts as an object in the system, because later on when we create trends based on facts, for example, or you know, it's all of that stuff is we need the data to be in our system. If there's a better way, patches are welcome. Right. Yep. Go ahead.
What about dynamic environments?
Yeah.
Is it supported?
Yeah, it does. No problem. You import will detect a new environment. The proxy knows to read the environment in the Puppet master configs and understand that, and gives you back that's how I work, for example, myself. And it adds the environments, they show up with their classes, with everything, parameters, just work. You know, it could lead that you have like 50 or 100 environments in Foreman, but that's okay. I mean, from day one, Foreman was designed to work in such a large setup. Yeah. Right? Anything else you want to? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Is it possible to clone a host?
Yes. The question was, is it possible to clone a host? Yes, you can. You can actually clone. So on this, you have a clone button. So pretty simple. Maybe I can show you, before I forget, if I'll just deploy something on OpenStack, for example. So all I change here, I change the location because I've associated OpenStack with the cloud. And here I'll have an OpenStack instance. So what will happen now is that the virtual machine tab, assuming I do it correctly, maybe I didn't. I'm still, yeah, okay. The virtual machine tab changes. So based on the context of the virtual provider, like if I choose vSphere, it's you get to see one setup. It's libvirt is different, OpenStack is, and so on. And in this case, and the same for EC2. Oh, wait, I'm in this overwrite mode. Wait, I'll start again. Just that we'll be on the safe side. So again, if I'm choosing OpenStack here, and what will happen is, again, this virtual machine, you see, changes accordingly. I can assign floating IP address. I can, bummer, sorry, bad demos as usual. The idea, in any way, that when you provision a system, the only thing that changes is the, this virtual machine tab. And you need to a little bit understand, like security group, tenant, and flavor, like what I want to provision on. But eventually, that's the only thing. And later on, when I submit, it's going to do an image-based provisioning on OpenStack and configure the instance. Pretty much in the same way like it does a kickstart post and installs Puppet. Oh yeah, I forgot to select the image. So probably I have a Fedora 18 image. So anyway, so what it does actually here, it's going to set up OpenStack instance, going to set wait for the IP address for this system, and then it actually tries to SSH into the system, because that's the only possible way we found that it works reliably across all providers, sadly. We kind of can use cloud init for those who use cloud init, but the certificate signing is always a good question. Do you put the certificate on your user data server and the metadata, or do you trust it or not? So we decided we use SSH to be on the safe side, that we can actually control. And this is going to take about a second, because the instance is actually booting up now and waiting for response to SSH. Maybe this takes a minute. But overall, it's exactly the same process. Like, one operator pretty much doesn't need to learn the whole thing all over again, just because you decided to roll out, to move from vSphere to Overt. You know, pretty easy for the operator. Yeah, there was a question here before? No? Yeah, go ahead.
Are there views to see which hosts are assigned with a certain class or with a certain host group?
Yeah, so of course, I told you that Foreman is a search-driven application. One of the nice things, you can create bookmarks. So let's say you want to care about host group. Sure, no problem. Give me all of the base systems, and I could bookmark that. Or maybe I want a Puppet class equal, you know, and you just get all of the system that has the Apache class. In this case, only one. So it's pretty much, you can, you know, and then you can bookmark it and save it, and you know, then it's easy for you later on to go and check it. Now the cool thing is that this search, which is pretty awesome, because it consists pretty much the same. It's actually, I don't know how many of you guys know SQL. It's not SQL, obviously. It's pretty easy, right? It's equal and or kind of query logic. But it actually gives you the ability to search for a specific match you're searching for. And that's really important when you have a dynamic environment that you want to respond to something. So give me all of the hosts that answer a certain condition. If a new host came up, the new host will also show up in there. So it's all the time could update and react to changes based on real data that comes from your system. So it's pretty awesome. A lot of people really use it. It has a Puppet function that you can retrieve it kind of out of the box, and you know, pretty awesome functionality. Yeah, any more questions? Yeah.
Could you use Foreman as a hardware inventory kind of thing?
Yeah, you can. You can. What you need to do, if you have Factor, okay, you could send. It's a one-liner script with curl, for example, and this will create hosts with their facts in Foreman. No problem. That's more or less how we collect the inventory from non-Puppet managed, from Puppet managed systems as well.
And additional data like asset tags or serial number or
so you can actually.
Duration.
So there are a few ways to do that. You could, you know, when you added a host, you can add any key value pair to it, like as a parameters. You could basically add here. I don't know, asset and value. For example, that's one way. If you really care about it and you want it to be visibly different, you can write a plugin that edit, as I said, maybe another tab or something like that. We actually have now in the latest release, or since the latest official release, we added the ability to have different host types. Like we distinguish between a host that got discovered to a managed host or just a host that is being reported. There's a different set of actions you take on them, and you could have another host type which is just an asset or whatever we end up calling it, and that the views will be different for that specific host. So it's very easy to change.
What happens if you hit the unmanaged?
So if I change a host from managed to unmanaged, probably it basically means I don't want to provision it. I don't want to care about provisioning it. I just care about ENC functionality and facts and things like that. So if I just click on it, you see how many tabs I have here. And when I click on it, I just have less tabs. I can change it back. Yeah. More questions? Come on. Yeah.
How can I extend Foreman that it manages my own proprietary DNS DHCP server? How would I do this?
So you have, the question was, how do I let Foreman manage my own proprietary DNS and DHCP services? Let's say you wrote your own DNS and DHCP server. Awesome. The proxies is built in a way that it's really easy to extend. For example, I didn't mention it, but the proxy, for example, even runs in Windows. You know, if you have a Windows DNS server, for example, we actually support that, or a DHCP server. So when you implement, for example, another DHCP server, it takes about 3 methods: add, remove, and list that you need to implement by yourself.
So I would have to write my own smart proxy for that?
You would need to write an extension to the proxy that implements 3 methods. Once to add a record, another to remove a record, and another to give you a list of records. And that's it. It is. If you look at the bind code or Active Directory code, it's not that long. Probably less than 100 lines. Yeah. And we are friendly. We have a really good community in terms of developers. We have a developer mailing list, developer ISC channel. We'll be happy to help. Yeah, any more questions? Is there anything you want to see that I didn't touch? There's like lots of screens and anything, or maybe I can go very quickly. This is always easy. Charts. This is your statistics on your whatever, your infrastructure. Audit log is here. I changed before, I changed from manage from true and false, right? So I can actually click on there and see the history of this server. Not much. I didn't have much history in this one, but basically you can go and see the history of every object that was changed in the system for a long, as long as the system is running. Under more, we have, straightforward things like in Puppet environment, host group classes, the smart variables, which was the predefined before parameterized classes. We just have the hierarchical part, but without the classes. Pretty much the same. The proxies, which is pretty simple setup. Maybe it's important to mention that Puppet. This is how we support multiple Puppet masters, multiple DHCP servers, multiple whatever of your infrastructure. So if you have a lot of networks, we can easily support that from a single place. And we can do all kind of. You want to see the certificates? I mean, it's not really useful, but there's a GUI for that. Okay, I'm not connected probably. Maybe I should. This is still pending. Right, never mind. But you can see the list of certificates. You can see, whatever your DHCP and DNS records, things like that. There's also under provisioning. So we have the compute resources. This is how, for example, you want to configure, let's say, VMware. So we get here, you have to put in your VMware credentials and choose a data center. If it's EC2, it's put your access key and set up the region and so on. So it's pretty easy UI to get started, to use it, to consume it. If there's other compute resources or providers that you want to have that you are using, we're using an excellent library called Fog. that it's easy to extend, and probably there's a good chance already include quite most of the most common providers, so it's really easy in Foreman to consume more, like if you have more. Yeah, question there.
As mostly Puppet clients run automatically and report their facts to the Foreman dashboard. I suppose there is there are some Puppet agents which do not run periodically. They show as unresponsive. But what if I want to run them per intent once a day, for example?
Okay.
They show up as unresponsive. Can I
so
remove them from unresponsive?
So the question was if I run Puppet clients on demand, can I make? Is there a way for them not to show as unresponsive? Right? Okay. So we don't have the term unresponsive, but we call it out of sync. But basically, there are two ways. First of all, you can increase the sync timeout or the run interval. The second way is to remove them from the alerting. Not ideal either, but you can say per host don't alert for if it's out of sync, so it doesn't show. There is a feature request which we never got around to, is to define a policy per group of systems. So for this group of systems, I'm not going to care if they're running or not. Yeah, but if there's a better approach you could think of, please let us know. Yeah.
What are your future plans besides improving the system?
What are the future plans besides improving Foreman forever, you mean? So it's perfect already. Right, so there's a few things. So first of all, the plugins architecture offers a huge amount of things we can add to Foreman. I think so as many integrations as possible with whatever to make your life easier. An obvious direction where we are going to is multi-host deployment for a single application. So a composite application consisting of multiple systems, where you could easily define this server, this application needs a database, needs a web server, needs some other batch processing, and then you could deploy many instances of that application as one unit. And they know how to figure out for their deployment what is the right password, what is the right credentials, how to